So we have Keshav here, who we have invited today to, and he's going to be speaking on Agile Beyond Agile. So Keshav, a little bit about Keshav. Keshav's been working as an Agile coach for an organization called Education First, and he comes with about 22 plus years of experience in various IT roles. And he did happen to mention to us that he sees himself as a specialist at failure. It's more of a borrowed quote, and I think he perceives himself as a very inquisitive and a curious person to make sense of the world. And I'm quite excited to have him here on behalf of Leadership Tribe to do this webinar with us. And I shall just walk you through a couple of slides, and then we shall hand over the mic to him. Perfect. So we at Leadership Tribe, our primary objective. So our objective is to support various leadership roles with various tools, techniques, and mostly, and most importantly, the people skills and the driving the value. And we also work with various organizations, leaders, coaches, and also focus groups. And it's all about sharing knowledge and with the wisdom of the crowd, creating sticky learning with individual teams, organizations. And we also do a little bit of building high performance teams and learning organizations, and also giving back to the community. That is something that is very important for all of us. So on this webinar, we have a small little Zoom manifesto that we've created for all of you. And just to make things a little more clear, so we are all here to learn together. We've got the chat window, which is, I think you've already used, some of you. Thank you for that. So you will have an option of panelists and attendees. So whenever you want to put in comments or reply to questions that Keshav will be putting in or asking, use panelists and attendees so that all the attendees can view your answers or what you type in. When you have questions, though, I would recommend use the Q&A option that you get on your screens, because it helps us keep all the questions together under one window. Because there is going to be a lot of free conversation flowing in the chat box, so we don't want to lose questions on the way. So just keep that in mind. And our webinar would be between 45 minutes to an hour, and we will keep some time for Q&A also for all of you. And on that note, I shall hand it over to Keshav.
Thank you, Aarti. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah?
Loud and clear, Keshav.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, hang on. Yeah. So I'm going to talk briefly for the next 40 minutes to an hour on Agile, Beyond Agile. So Agile, as we know it, note the case there with a capital E. So Agile is, as most of you know, it's a set of practices focusing on iterative and incremental delivery, collaborative working culture, self-organized feature teams over directed component teams. Also has a strong focus on quick delivery so that customers can realize value. And success is generally measured in terms of generating customer value, which is how it should be. Although there are cases where, unfortunately, many organizations tend to focus on delivery more than generation or understanding how well we are able to generate value. So my experience has been that a lot of organizations, what does Agile mean for them? It's all about delivery. It's all about execution. And I think I'm not speaking for myself, because if you go and refer to the Oxford or the Cambridge dictionaries, they, Agile is described as a project management technique. That's it. It's all about execution. On the other hand, being Agile is quite different. So strong product companies, they have these qualities. They're quite focused on their customer. There's a strong culture of collaboration, of cohesion, trust. There's a strong identity, excellent product leadership. They're quite focused on technology, and they have empowered teams. Empowered teams versus having component or feature teams. So what do feature teams do? A product owner just gives a bunch of requests or items in the backlog, and they convert these into features that are then shipped. But empowered teams are more than that. They're not just feature factories. They have the authority to make decisions, to solve problems. Here you see, these are companies in terms of their market share, I have shown them from the year 2001 to 2016. Now, market share is basically the number of outstanding shares multiplied by the price of each share. That can be a bit misleading. For example, if you see for the year 2016, you might see Apple being valued at 582 billion. If I were to sell all the Apple shares, I'm not going to get 582 billion. Definitely not. I might probably get 30% of that. But what it's good at is in telling us relative numbers. So if the basis of valuation of comparison is the same, then we can relatively say that one is more valuable than the other. So what I'm trying to say in this slide is that starting from 2001 until 2016, the companies that are most valuable, meaning the market, rates these companies as being valuable in terms of their ability to generate free cash flows. These are being increasingly disrupted. You see more technology companies here. And on the right, I have this is updated as of 4 or 5 days back. You'll notice that most of the companies here are tech companies. They're very disruptive, very aggressive. They've changed the business models in several industries such as news, advertising, media streaming, and so on. Personal devices, uh, and in terms of how we are able to relate to each other, social media, and so on. So, with the exception of Aramco, Saudi Aramco, all the other companies are really agile organizations, including Berkshire Hathaway. It wouldn't be what it is without being quick on its feet. Tesla might be a bit of here and there, because there are some who view it as an automotive company, but Tesla really sees itself as a tech company. Now, I'm just going to briefly talk about these Davids that you see here. Who are these people? PayPal, Salesforce, Square, Snapchat, ServiceNow, Zoom. These are new and upcoming organizations that are challenging the way we do work. They are displacing the Goliaths, challenging them. 25 years back, none of these was even an idea. They were not even an idea, and yet here they are. They've been dominating the market space, and they have these characteristics, as I mentioned ago: a strong product focus. For example, take a look at PayPal. How many services does PayPal offer? Just one service. They're good at payments. That's it. On the other hand, Citibank, Bank of America, they have a suite of services such as retail banking, cards, loans, mortgages, and so on. They're not really great at any one of them, but they just have a range of services. So the market rewards that organization that's really outstanding in terms of its product focus. You look at customer engagement. Atlassian makes Jira and Confluence. It's really easy to collaborate with their support staff. You can search for some of the common problems that you might have, and it's probably been answered already. On the other hand, if you were to take advantage, if you were to approach Oracle for this, you'd need to pay a separate contract just to get support. These organizations also have outstanding, very vibrant organizational culture, very coherent, very connected with each other. Teams have a lot of ability, a lot of leeway to make decisions, and they leverage technology for outcomes. They're not shy of using them. Airbnb, for example. Airbnb literally means bread and breakfast on the air, on cloud. That's it. This is their business model, is to connect people who have rooms to offer to those people who need rooms. That's it. It's a very simple business model. They've made very good use of technology. This was started, I guess, in 2008. The founder was in California. He had to attend a conference. He ran out. No hotels were willing to offer him a room. A friend gave him a mattress. That was it. And then he came up with this idea. What is their valuation? 85 billion. What is Marriott valued at? 45 billion. If you were to combine Marriott at 45 and Hilton at 30, you'd still reach 75. Airbnb is valued much more than that, and they have no assets. They don't have these assets in the form of hotels in prime areas. So these are the organizations who are really quick on their feet and they're disrupting the market space, and they've dislodged the Goliaths. On the other hand, I'm going to talk about an organization which is a Goliath and which has reinvented itself. Most of you are probably familiar with Royal Enfield, so I'll very briefly go over its history for those of us who are still not familiar with it. There's a small typo here, I apologize for that. It wasn't really founded in 1901, it was founded in 1893, but they only began manufacturing motorcycles in 1901, involved in both the wars. In the year 1932, launched an iconic model called the Bullet, and then due to the invasion of the Japanese who made better bikes, they had to shut down. But what happened in India was 1947, India got independent, and they had a very difficult border with both, Tibet and China and Pakistan. Very difficult terrains along these borders. So they needed a motorcycle that could traverse these areas. So they approached Royal Enfield, which already was chosen by the British Army. And an agreement was reached to manufacture these bullet motorcycles then it was called Madras. Um, so this company just plodded along. They made some motorcycles which were not particularly famous. By 1990, they began to face problems because they couldn't face the competition from Japanese motorcycles, which entered India as well in the mid 80s. By 1994, Eicher Motors buys out Madras motorcycles, and more importantly, they acquire global rights for use of the Royal Enfield brand. And in 1999, they faced this issue where they need to shut down the plant. So this is the dilemma in 99. Sales were just about 2,000 a month, but the plant had a capacity to make 6,000 bikes a month. The company is loaded with debt, and it was no longer feasible to continue the operations. So the promoter's son, Vikram Lal's son, he was a 26-year-old person, Siddharth Lal. He was deeply connected. He was in love with the motorcycle. He really liked it, Royal Enfield. And he made a proposal: give me 2 years time and I'll try to turn this company around. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so the board, imposed some conditions on him. But this was, the industry snapshot back in 99, when Royal Enfield faced the dilemma of facing bankruptcy or to continue operations. Now, this is the Canos model that many of us are familiar with. And for those of us who are not familiar with it, I'll briefly mention that Cano model, gives you a model that describes how features become normalized over time. So if you look at the basic needs, which is the lower curve, these are needs that are already accepted by users. But for example, in the mid 80s, the Japanese motorcycles were fuel efficient, easy to own, operate, uh, and they offered a world of convenience and desirability to Indians, and who began to buy them in large numbers, and that became a basic need. If you produced a vehicle or a motorcycle that wasn't fuel efficient or was cumbersome to maintain, it's quite likely it wouldn't sell. On the other hand, the marketplace was demanding new features, like they wanted a tachometer, 5-speed gearbox, disc brake, and so on. And this was also a time when Hero Motors, as it's known today, but back then it was called Hero Honda, they launched a famous model called the CBZ, which captured the imagination of many young people back in the day. So briefly I'm going to talk about Royal Enfield's evolution since that year, 1999. Uh, there's a small activity, and I'd appreciate it if you can share your feedback in the chat channel. Think of a brand that you're attached to. Is there something that would persuade you to consider giving up on it? We'll give ourselves a minute. Okay, Dettol, excellent. Dettol, Zoom, steady increase in price, Trust, Apple, Honda. Dishonesty is something that would make you give it up. Ambassador, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe the car losing its ISP, Colgate. Yeah, when it no longer represents your values. OnePlus, it's a mobile phone. Mercedes, Samsung, Coke. All right, thank you very much for your answers. Really nice answers. Thank you. So let me bring my focus back. Thank you. Right. So um, what was Royal Enfield? What did it stand for? What did its customers like about it? Now I'll narrate a short incident. Back in 2000, I was working in Noida, and I once happened to go to it was an ordinary mom and pop shop, and where the shopkeeper sold rice and lentils, dal and oil and papads, that kind of a shop. And he had a Royal Enfield parked outside his shop. So I was quite impressed. This guy must be making a lot of margins to be able to afford this. So I went in and spoke with him, and as I bought, the things I was supposed to buy, what did it cost you? What is the fuel efficiency? And then I asked him, how do you like the bike? So the thing he told me was ekdam badhiya, ekdam badhiya. This was in Noida. And over the several years, I was curious. I began to speak with many other, owners of the Bullet, and then they said something similar. The English-speaking ones would say, "It gives me a royal feeling." So, being the programmer that I was back in the day, I was quite curious. What does this mean? Ekdam badhiya, and it gives me a royal feeling. Can you break it down? Until I rode one, and then I experienced it for myself. So, a lot of people who are buying these bikes, these were middle class people. These were people, they're probably the only ones who are paying taxes. They were being harassed by their bosses, by their wives, for not earning enough, by their children for not giving them the kind of, for not giving them the quality of life. So, they were a bit disappointed with themselves until they wrote the Royal Enfield Bullet, because then it gave you a royal feeling. So this bike had an ability to make a transformative effect in the way you perceived yourself. So when you rode a Bullet, it makes a particular, a very distinctive sound. People make way for it. And then people treat you like royalty. They just look at you, and people say that, hey, we hear you even 2 streets away. So that's the kind of, it gives you the feeling that you're special. So that is the experience that, the Indians valued. And Siddharth Lal was quite conscious about it, that this is a Royal Enfield, although it has a different reputation in the UK where it's a classic bike. In India, it's a royal bike. So even if the bike leaks, which it did, it's a royal bike. We forgive weaknesses in the people we idolize. But of course, he was not blind to its faults. And then he began to meet many dealers across the country, and he discovered that the dealers had been discounting the bikes to show increase in sales, because there's an incentive tied to how many bikes you're able to sell. So once he stopped dealer level discounting, and everyone has to pay the full price, the losses became, they got cut into half. And then there was a plant in Jaipur as well. So that was also shut down. And the workforce was distributed between the Iker plant, which used to make trucks, and the Royal Enfield plant in Chennai. And then there were some quality issues that he wanted to address. So he got on board somebody from the UK who was an importer of Royal Enfield bikes. That was, these were two important steps. As well, he also undertook some other steps. One was to collaborate with an Austrian manufacturer called AVL to produce a more efficient engine, but which still worked on the old architecture. And the other was to collaborate with an engineer called Stuart McGuigan. I've showed his picture here. He's with some of the Royal Enfield engineers here. So he was associated with the University of Cranfield. He collaborated with Stuart and produced a 5-speed gearbox. And he collaborated with the Austrians to produce the AVL engine, which was marginally more efficient. Now, here there's another point I wanted to bring to your attention. The old British vintage bikes, they have the gear shifts on the right side, whereas most Japanese bike have it on the left side. And if you're going to change a gear shift from right to left, and you introduce a new engine which doesn't have the characteristics of the old engine, the old engine was a cast iron engine, are you going to lose customers? And what is the purpose of introducing 5-speed gearbox and a new engine? That was to gain new customers. What if you fail at both and you fall between the stools? So that was a risk, and that's a business case documented somewhere. I think some professors from IIM Bangalore also tried to answer that case. So what Royal Enfield did was, okay, they said we'll follow two paths. Path one, we give the old Bullet with the old cast iron engine with the right side, 4-speed right side shift. And then we produce the Electra and the Thunderbird, which are new models aimed at young people. And we give them the new engine and the 5-speed gearbox, which is on the left side. So fair enough, Royal Enfield continued to produce bikes and people began to buy them. And eventually with the same engineer, with Stuart McGuigan, the next step around the mid 2000s was to produce an entirely new architecture. It was called the unit construction engine. It was an aluminum alloy based engine. That would significantly change Royal Enfield's fortunes. So here, as you see, this is a graph that shows the motorcycle sales, and I've basically covered our time from. I didn't have sales from starting 2000, but I've only covered sales until 2009. And 2009, they managed to sell about 52,000 bikes, which is almost double what they were doing in 2000. And I'm going to start from the year 2009, when, like I said before, they introduced the new architecture engines in both 350 and 500 cc displacements. And they introduced new models. These are really classic looking models which look like the old motorcycles that were made way back in the 1960s. Now they had limited budget because all they were able to do is double the number of bikes they sold, but they were still constrained by the number of by the budget. So they didn't have a budget for marketing. So what they decided to do was they wanted to directly engage with their customers by having a ride with the Royal Enfield program. So what this means is you organize a bunch of customers and then you say, hey, let's go to Rann of Kutch, or let's go to Tirunandapuram, or even Mysore, or some place like that. So this built a lot of customer engagement. Now what happened was once they introduced these newer engines which did not leak, which did not seize, which did not blow their gaskets. So what happened was the average age of the buyer fell from 46 to 28, which means suddenly very young people who spent about 2-3 years in their jobs, they probably been saving for the bike. They started buying these bikes, whereas earlier it was just middle-aged men. Maybe they were going through a midlife crisis. These were the ones who were buying the bike. And here you can see the adoption curve. This is the product adoption curve. And what Royal Enfield did was to again kickstart that curve to bring a newer demographic to enter the market for their motorcycles. And once they, I've also here given another image that shows how consumption has been spreading faster today. So today products have a much steeper, curve, adoption curve. So once they began to, I'll show the graph a little later, the sales graph, they were able to make enough money, and they opened a new manufacturing unit at Orangudam in Chennai. Now this was also opened because the waiting lists for their bikes were becoming pretty difficult. For Classic 350 was a best-selling model, and that had a waiting list of about 10 months, and they really wanted to address that. And eventually they launched the Continental GT, which was a motorcycle that again looked very much like the Continental from the yesteryears. And by the end of 2014, that surpassed Harley Davidson in sales. So Harley Davidson entered India, but they really targeted the high end of the leisure motorcycling market. But Royal Enfield, in terms of sales numbers, they were able to match Royal Enfield by the end of 2014. So these were the new models. As you can see, they look really, they look almost the same except for the engines. And this is the Continental, looks very similar. And these are the sales. As you can see, between 2009 and 2015, this 2009 started with about 52,000 bikes being sold. 2015, they'd reached about 6 lakh bikes per year. Now, the next phase, as you can see from here, from 2015, was really in terms of Royal Enfield trying to spread its wings. All right, so they've become quite successful in India, and they have an excellent brand recognition. How about spreading our wings, making our presence felt across the world? But they felt really that instead of being a motorcycle company, they needed to approach this by being a lifestyles company. Excuse me. So there was a subtle shift in their positioning in terms of how they're able to, how others perceive them. They were also not shy about investing significant capital expenditures, and their customer engagement became even more pronounced. So product leadership, what changes what improvements did they bring about? New branding. If you look at the old one looks like this, very simple, Royal Enfield. The new ones, they came up with 2-3 logos for different purposes. For example, there's a yellow logo here. It literally says made like a gun, because this was exactly how Royal Enfield back in the 1940s and 50s advertised themselves. Somewhere along the way, the Indians lost track of that. So they again revived that. And then they really wanted to do makeover for their dealerships. They wanted it to look modern. It needed to have a certain ambience to attract customers. For them, they had lounges. You can just sit in lounges, drink water, and there's someone who'd speak with you. And this gave the same experience as you would if you walked into a higher-end manufacturer's showroom, such as Triumph or Harley Davidson. They also launched apparels and accessories. Apparels was an unorganized market in India. There were some local, brands making, motorcycling jackets, motorcycling pants, boots, scarves, but only limited in their geographical, spread. But Royal Enfield took that seriously, and they began making Royal Enfield branded apparel. Accessories include things like crash guards, oil caps, stuff like that. They also launched new products, and now they were not shy about their World War II involvement, their association. So even today, if you walk into a Royal Enfield store, you'll see a huge mural that shows their visual picture. It shows times when Royal Enfield was deployed during the Second World War. They made big investments, outright purchased Harris Performance, which was a custom performance boutique shop, organization based in the UK, set up a brand new technology center, ground up, in Leicestershire, a new factory in Wallam Wagdal, opened 600 new studio stores. These are really small stores. They don't need to be as elaborate as the regular stores. These are for remote areas in villages, for example, or small towns. Opened 3 subsidiaries in North America, Brazil, and Thailand, and 77 stores in places like Colombia, Argentina, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, UAE, France, and so on. Deeper engagement with customers. Now, whereas earlier you just had an ordinary ride option, this time they had ride outs, they had a rider mania. Ride outs are, for example, 5-day riding events. Rider Mania is like an annual gathering at Goa where people from all over India come. They want to, deepen their engagement with Royal Enfield, connect with each other, have fun, drink beer, chill out. Rides are short rides that last for a day. Greater engagement with the community. You can post your pics on Instagram tagging Royal Enfield, and then they would forward it. You can also make YouTube videos. You can create an account, log into Royal Enfield's site, organize a ride. If you customize your bike, you can share a picture. Embracing diversity, there were women-centered rides and lots of participation from people from several countries, including Japan. Also conducted off-road riding camps. if you wanted to ride, you need special skills or you need different skills to ride in places like Himalayas. So Royal Enfield started conducting these camps where uh, you just spend about 8 hours, starting from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the evening, and the cost is not really affordable, 1,500 rupees. They would teach you the basics of how to ride on dirt tracks. And this is the large engagement on social media, 7.5 million active users. These are examples of their themed rides. This is a Himalayan Odyssey exclusively for women. Product teams, now in terms of, they're already set up a technology center in the UK. Now these teams began to collaborate with each other, forming geographically spread teams where they would design engines, motorcycles, where they would, the UK team, for example, would design the initial concept, and the Indian team would just validate that concept, give suggestions. So it was truly a collaborative team that was empowered to make decisions. Product managers had lots of room to make decisions. For example, the Himalaya product manager, he was really not a person who was sitting in an office somewhere in Chennai. He was a person who was actively riding motorcycles in the Himalayas. He knew what the conditions were, what are the challenges motorcycles are going to face, what are the difficult places in Himalayas. For example, there are certain places which are filled with water. How do you design a bike for that? As well, if you're riding on the Himalayas, you're probably riding at about 18,000 feet above sea level, and that's the height at which many airplanes fly. So they were able to give very detailed feedback in terms of ideas. So this is the Himalaya that was launched in 2016. It had some quality issues at the beginning, but it was eventually improved, and it has been very well received. This was launched in the year 2018, and it's the crown jewel in Royal Enfield's portfolio. This is the only two-cylinder and twin-cylinder engine to be manufactured by an Indian manufacturer. So Royal Enfield went from being bankrupt in 1999 to being the only manufacturer to produce a twin-cylindered engine in 2018. That was a massive progress. Very well received by the motoring press around the world. It's a very simple motorcycle. It's fun, very approachable. You don't need special skills. It's not a liter class motorcycle. Very easy to maintain, very easy to customize, and lots of fun. And it basically it gave a very low entry point for a lot of youngsters to re-enter the world of motorcycling. The problem in many countries like the UK and in Europe was that a lot of motorcycles were quite expensive. If you wanted a nice bike, for example, a Harley Davidson, you'd need to spend something like $10,000, $12,000, and yet you'd only be able to buy an entry class motorcycle. Whereas this cost about $5,000, $6,000. That was it. And they were, they reinforced their association with the Second World War. So here you see a classic 500 in the Pegasus livery. The Pegasus was a lightweight motorcycle that was dropped literally from the airplanes into the enemy territory during the D-Day, as we call it. And it was used during the wars. So Royal Enfield, they kind of had an agreement with the parachute regiment, and then they produced this in limited numbers again. Royal Enfield also offers a lot of motorcycle, customizing workshops to actually showcase their skills. So here are two examples. One is made by Rajputana Customs, an Indian company, and the other is made by a company based in Vietnam. And this model that's made by by the Vietnamese company. It looks quite similar to a very popular motorcycle called the Bruff Superior. Did this translate into sales? There were some hiccups for Royal Enfield. There's floods in Chennai in around 2018, which challenged their ability to produce motorcycles. There were strikes at their plant, and more recently, there's been a pandemic which has slowed down growth. But the prospects, they're really bright. At least that's what Royal Enfield believes. So where's Royal Enfield now? 2021. They have a new 350cc J platform, which replaces the older 350cc, which had a which earned some notoriety for giving out vibrations. Their portfolio is on par with the UK-based Royal Enfield in the 60s, during the heyday of the Britain's cultural growth. 95% market share in India. They opened a new assembly center in Argentina to cater to South America. There's a lot of interest in South America. Make it your own. You can just order a customized motorcycle from the factory. It's going to be shipped to you. You don't need to go out and customize your bike. And they're taking more opportunities to engage with their customers. For example, they offered a class on how you can make videos using GoPro, and then you can upload them to YouTube to have awesome looking videos. So uh, I'd like, there's a small activity I'd like you to do. I hope Chitra will share 2 links with you. So please take 3 minutes and share your perception of these 2 advertisements. All right, I hope you've had time to watch the 2 ads. I'd be curious if you have some feedback to share on that. All right, so thank you for your feedback. My own feedback was that, excuse me. So my own feedback was that the while the Honda advertisement was trying to sell you features, features over. If you also looked at the frame of the video, they really were focusing on the motorcycle. But if you were to look at if you were to look at the Royal Enfield ad, it was all about an experience. It was about creating a lifestyle for you. So that's the bigger picture that Royal Enfield was trying to sell you. Also, the Honda ad had a text, so that really appeals to the analytical part of your brain. So I've seen some of the feedback that this might be more of an MBA case, and how is it related to being agile? So in terms of being, sorry, I'm moving across slides. All right. So in terms of being customer focused, Royal Enfield it already has several informal clubs, outstanding customer engagement. They're able to receive feedback. For example, there was a certain person who rode the bike at certain really high altitudes, and he experienced a failure, and Royal Enfield was able to immediately connect with him. So you can already see that there's a very close engagement there. Strong culture and identity. So in terms of an identity, they were able to decide for themselves, do we want to be yet another motorcycle manufacturer? Do we want to produce liter class multi-cylinder bikes? It's not what they wanted. They had they were associated with a big marquee, and they wanted to continue that legacy, offer authentic motorcycling experience. Product leadership, excellent product design, execution, value delivery, giving motorcycles that are ones that are valued by the customer. Technology focused. Royal Enfield feels that they are able to compete with the best of Japanese and German manufacturing, and it's also an observation that has been shared by many people, by many reviewers, including motorcycle journalists. Culture of collaboration. Teams are allowed to make decisions on their own. They are empowered. They're not just feature teams. They're not just here to add features uh, by somehow keeping customers engaged. There's a culture of taking decisions and being responsible for that. All right, and the true test, did they really create any value for their customers, for their stakeholders? I'll probably take two cases. This is their shareholders value, the value of the the shareholders. The price was about 1.5 rupees back in 2001. So if someone had made a decision to buy about 10,000 of these shares, the corpus that they have now would give them a range of options. Their OEMs benefited as well, and they gave a awesome value to their customers. So on the lower right picture, you see a lady who's been riding a motorcycle across the world. So in summary, I would say that this is a very successful case where Agile, as we know it, is not implemented on an execution level, but it's used on a leadership level. This was all I wanted to talk about. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any. Right, so Sunny Pandey, that's right. I like your observation where you say Honda's product only. I'm not here to downplay any brand or any organization, but there is a certain difference between being a product failure, a product success and a market success. So this is the bigger point that I'm trying to bring. That whereas as agile teams, we try to bring good products. We try to bring products quickly and fast to the marketplace. This is what we want to do. But good products are not they're not enough for you. You need to have a marketing success. So that's the bigger point I'm trying to make here. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so I'll give some context here. I use this approach to present this case because I was inspired by a couple of books called Inspired and Engaged. I'll be happy to share links to those books. Now, the author of that book actually approaches Agile from a completely different perspective. These are coaches, but they're not Agile coaches in the way we know them. and they have a pretty, I would say a pretty, they don't have a very positive view of how agile is being used, or it's being used in a very limited way. These are, I'd say, product coaches that coach product, tech product companies in Silicon Valley, and they got their inspiration from Bill Campbell, who was a very successful product coach. So some of the approaches and techniques that they're talking about, I found it to be quite different from a lot of other, books that I read on Agile, like SAFe and some other, approaches. And this is what inspired me to present this case. In the end, I'd say they were able to produce outstanding value to their shareholders. Any other questions? So I hope that a little bit answers, some feedback on how this is a case study. So how does your case study help us to take build versus buy decision? Right. So there are several, there are a few factors you want to take into consideration. For example, do you want to build everything, which is what, for example, Royal Enfield was doing at some point, and it made for them sense because they were struggling in all areas. They're struggling in many areas. So would you go and focus, every part of your plan to produce all good components? No, you'd focus on what's going to matter to you, to make ultimately what's a good motorcycle. It's a good chassis, a good engine, and a lot of other parts can be outsourced, and which is how it's being made today. For example, brakes are being made by another manufacturer. Likewise, you would also want to, for example, consider the cost of making your components in-house. One important decision that Royal Enfield did was to retain certain aspects of manual production that would give them an edge. For example, their tanks are still hand painted. Some of their tanks, they're still hand painted. So a lot of people, they have a lot of attachment to these things. The fact that their vehicles are still being made by hand. I'm curious if there are any other questions. How did they build the capability to be agile with their suppliers? I don't have details on this. I'm hoping that someday I might be able to spend more time and investigate this in detail. However, I would like to say that they hired the current CEO, who is Vinod Dasari, is someone who's been associated with Ashok Leyland. So they brought in a lot of lean manufacturing principles, and they literally tried to bring down the amount of inventory that was basically work in progress. They tried to bring that down, and they also tried to establish stricter supply on demand kind of arrangements with their suppliers. So these are, at least from what I've seen, some approaches to become more lean in terms of their manufacturing. Agile, I don't know.
Keshav, there was also a question, do you find that it needs to be full products or can just some features of products suffice?
I missed that question.
It's in the Q&A section.
Q&A section. Okay, excellent. I was looking at the chat. Do you find that it needs to be full products, or can just some features of products suffice? I'm struggling to understand this question. By full products, I'm not sure I understand this. Does it need to be full products?
Mustafa, would you be able to elaborate a little more on that question?
All right, so I'll answer it as best as I know. Do they need to offer, I'd say, products across the entire range? Absolutely no. This is a decision they took. Like I said, they want to be a lifestyle company. They want to be a fun, laid back, cool kind of a company. They want to make motorcycles in the mid motorcycling segment. They entertain no ambitions of getting into the leader class wars between Honda, Kawasaki, and some of these other big motorcycles. They have no aspiration to bring them to do that. They'll continue to make just air cooled, simple engines. That is it. That's what they're going to do. and they're happy with that, because their aim is not just to make motorcycles. Their aim is to build a brand, a certain lifestyle. And I was not able to find reference to it, but they've been consistently getting awards for the best brand engagement with their customers. I hope that answers the question to some degree. Do we have some more time, or would you like to take over?
We've got 10 minutes if there's anything
Sure.
further you want to add, Keshav.
I'll continue to look at some of the Q&A messages there. They keep scrolling up a little fast. Yeah, build versus buy could also be, for example, if you take the case of Apple, they just give out the specifications and then hand it over to Foxconn. It's up to them to fulfill that. All they're looking for is the experience. That is it. So it could take. It's not a binary decision. There are there are ranges of decision you could take within that. All right, I'll scroll through the chat to see if there are more questions or observations.
Yeah, I think you've covered quite a bit of the questions and observations.
I happen to. I'll also answer this question in a slightly different way. I think there is some feeling among some of the participants that, hey, this is not what we expected it to be, and I really didn't intend it to be that way, as I already said before. But there's also another. It came out during an interview with Siddharth Lal. He answered a question saying, I somehow escaped business school, and we didn't get into this, market analysis, research, this kind of a thing. Maybe this may be along the lines of something some of you have said. We didn't get into all of that. We wanted to have an excellent understanding of our customers, have a pulse on what they wanted and build products that people loved. That was it. He wasn't an MBA, and I don't think Royal Enfield ever hired someone from a B school or a consultancy. They didn't do anything of the sort, and they've managed to create such a, they've basically Harley Davidson has just quit India. They're not able to compete, and it's true with many other motorcycles as well. So the key point here is that demographics are changing. We live in a world where millennials are entering workforce. People's perception, the way they value the things, these things are changing, and these are not generally taught within the agile approaches that we use, because it's mostly on execution, not so much on strategic planning